while maybe a couple of you are still coming in, today we have a very nice and international audience. So I'm really happy that all of you are joining us for, I think, a very hot topic. My name is Bart Horsten. I'm one of the board members of the Belgian-Chinese Chamber of Commerce, or also said BCECC. So the Belgian-Chinese Chamber, as maybe some of you know, but for those who do not know us, we are the largest bilateral chamber of commerce in Belgium, focusing on companies engaged in business with or in China. We are a non-profit organization. We have about 500 members. We established already in 1980s, so a long time ago. And our main objective is to promote the economic, financial, and cultural, but also academic cooperation between Belgium and China. We do this by organizing seminars and webinars like this one on a broad range of topics. We also organize networking events, company visits, lunches with delegations or high-level officials. So a lot of Chinese delegations also visiting us. So if you have any questions or want to exchange information, please join us and to participate in some of our offline and online events. So today's topic is China's cross-border e-commerce platforms and specifically Temu. So I'm sure most of you know that in the past years, these cross-border e-commerce platforms from China have really been disrupting traditional retail markets. And the first one, which probably you all know, is AliExpress, but then soon afterwards followed by Temu and Shein. But of course, as with many topics about China, in the mainstream media and also the general public, often we get a rather one-sided story. And of course, as usual, also some of these concerns are obviously legitimate, but we also see that often there are a lot of misconceptions, and the same is also with Temu. That's why today we invited two distinguished speakers who will join us in this panel discussion. The first one is Ed Sander. He's from the Netherlands. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
Ed is a China digital tech researcher, very brilliant writer on different platforms. One of them is TechBus Asia, TechBus China. He's also a public speaker at China Talk and very interesting tour leader also for a lot of interesting China tech trips. The second speaker is Vincent. He's from Belgium. Welcome, Vincent. Vincent is an AI and innovation consultant, and one of the companies he's working for is Keras. But maybe Ed and Vincent, you could briefly also introduce yourself after this. So maybe Ed, could you start?
Well, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me, and I think you basically wrapped it up. I've lived in China for quite some time, and since 2011, I've been studying Chinese tech, and I write for TechBus China, very in-depth reports, and I do public speaking, and I take people to China on study tours, basically, like you said.
Great. Vincent, could you briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Likewise, also thank you for having me. So my name is Vincent Ness. Let's call me a seasoned expert, what's in the name, but in data and AI. Around 17 years in the industry, in technology industry. Really blended mix of technology and marketing and digital consumer behavior. So did a lot of things, serial entrepreneur, founded some companies. And now, as first mentioned, I'm leading AI in a multinational company. And I think I'm here today to discuss Temu with you. Thank you.
Yes. So indeed, we have a panel discussion today. After 45 minutes or so, all of you will have the chance to ask questions. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. I will see indeed whether or not we could also include them into the discussion itself or after the discussion. But let's start with the beginning indeed. As I said, we will focus on Temu. Maybe we'll have some chance also to talk about some of the other platforms, but maybe Ed, I think you are best placed to briefly describe the Temu business model, because I think that's important as a basic.
Yeah. I think the first thing that is very important to know is that Temu is a cross-border e-commerce platform of Pinduoduo, which is a top 3 e-commerce player in the domestic market in China. and they have been active since 2016, and thereby they have a very strong integration into the supply chain. They've got lots of merchants and factories that already sell on their platform in China. And in 2022, they decided they wanted to go cross-border because they weren't growing as fast anymore inside China. So that resulted in Temu being launched in September 2022 in the United States. Now, the business model basically is that they invite these factories and these merchants to uh, give the lowest price possible to Temu. Temu will put the materials, the goods in their warehouse, and then Temu basically will decide the selling price and they will sell it on their platform to Western consumers. So the factory or merchant doesn't have anything to say about the actual selling price. Temu determines that. And then when the consumer buys, initially they would ship that from a Temu warehouse by airplane to different countries around the world. And after selling these goods, they would pay the factory the low price that they agreed upon when these goods were put in the Temu warehouse. Now, recently, they've also launched what they call the semi-managed model compared to what I just described, the fully managed model. In the semi-managed model, they also allow the merchants to put the goods in a warehouse overseas. So, for instance, somewhere in Europe or in the United States, and then Temu will again sell it, but the merchant will be responsible for logistics. So that's basically the business model that they have. Not just discussing price. I think we'll come back to why they're so cheap, but that's the rough logistical business model they have.
Right, right. Indeed, maybe we'll talk about these different models a little bit more in detail afterwards, but let's indeed focus on the price first. So I did some tests myself recently, and indeed, if you just go on the Temu app or the platform, it's crazy. I mean, you see products which are so cheap, which basically, of course, I've been to China many times myself, so I think I can think of how those products can be so cheap, but nevertheless, I think that's the main question for many consumers. How can they be so cheap? Because if I go on Amazon or any other platform, you will never find those products so cheap. How can anybody make money on this? But there is a good explanation, I think.
Yeah, correct. So what happens is that in the case of Temu, one reason why it's so cheap is that they go straight to the manufacturers and ask these manufacturers to give a very low price in exchange for a very high volume. So the manufacturer will make a tiny margin, but they will sell so much that in absolute terms, they will make a lot of money if their products are successful on Temu. The next thing is that there's no wholesale and retail as we normally have in between the Temu and the consumer. So that lowers all of the involved parties that need to add their own margin and their own bit of profit. Now, on the other hand, because they ship from China and the average order to Europe comes with about roughly $9 in logistical cost, that sort of compensates or that sort of destroys a lot of the price incentive or the price difference. So why can it be so cheap then still? One thing is that they have a system where they have a bidding, sort of like an auction system where they sort of stimulate the merchants to continuously lower their price. And the factory basically with the lowest price will get the volume that Temu can generate on their platform. On the other side, you also have Temu subsidizing. So quite often people say, well, these goods from China, they must be subsidized because they are so cheap. And then most of the time people are they're thinking about the Chinese government subsidizing these goods, but it's actually Pinduoduo, the mother company, that subsidizes these goods to about 20 to 30% of the price to make them extra low. So people will think that this is the cheapest web shop on the internet. And as people are becoming loyal customers, then Pinduoduo and Temu will basically start lowering this subsidy, which then results in the prices going up. But people are already used to buying on Temu. But in the end, at the end of the day, they want to reach prices that are about 80% to 85% of the prices where you can buy them for on Amazon. And talking about Amazon, Amazon has a very different business model. They deliver very quickly from fulfillment by Amazon warehouses, but this also results in higher commissions that merchants need to pay to Amazon. They need to pay for search engine advertising to be visible on Amazon. So about half of the sales price on Amazon actually stays within the Amazon company and all kinds of commissions. So these are some of the main reasons why there's such big price differences between, for instance, Amazon and Temu.
Okay. So basically, if you say subsidy, it's better probably to talk about discounts. And indeed, the discounts which is subsidized by Pinduoduo, which is or the PD Holdings, which is a mother company of Temu. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. We'll dig into that a little bit later as well. But maybe first, Vincent, I think not long after Temu launched in the US, or maybe after they launched in Europe, because they launched in Europe a little bit later, I think you did a data security check. I think it was in March of 2023, right?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of buzz about it because indeed you found a lot of, let's say, shortcomings or issues with the app. Could you talk about it a little bit? What exactly did you do?
Sure. So indeed, it was around March 2023. The Flemish TV, they asked me to do an investigation, and it was mainly based because there were a lot of, let's say, bad publicity coming out, especially in the US. And there was a company called Grizzly Reports who did a very destructive report about Temu, and not only Temu, but also TikTok. So it was like all the Chinese shops. The only problem was with Grizzly Reports, it was a little bit of fraudulent company, and they're really making money if the public stock market goes down. So what is the truth in that kind of research? It is written in a, let's say, with not the right intentions, but still a lot of the research was valid. So we reviewed the full research, and we found a lot of things which were, let's say, not okay for the European market or in a European context by then. There were some things where we found in the code, and just let's phrase this from the beginning correctly. Old version, very early stage, only on Android. That's what public media turns it. So it's not that they're spying in a constantly way. But it was back then, it was quite strange for a shopping app if you compare it to Dutch or Belgian shoppings like Marktplaats or Coolblue or any other shopping app, or even eBay. They didn't have those kind of permissions, like microphone access, like location tracking, clipboard access, the right to execute code. So it was written in a very strange way, and you could say Chinese, but it was just a different way. Like it was launched very fast, where you saw just a lot of shortcomings, which is where we are not used to in a European context, where everything is quite safe, everything is quite secure. You test it, then you go to the market, and here it was, okay, we will launch to the market, we will collect everything, and later on we will scale down. So that was a little bit the research where it was about.
Well, I think, could you give one specific example, which indeed
Sure.
this raised, of course, a lot of concerns, because actually that were exactly the points that probably those specialists were focusing on. And then, of course, everybody starts talking about it, and then they have to correct it.
Yeah. For example, a very good example, which I discussed with Ed, by the way, very intensively, is, for example, the permission to record audio. We can say from a marketing point of view, besides from any other permissions, but like, okay, location and contact, you want to know as much as possible about your consumer, because your goal as a marketeer is to deliver the right product at the right time to the right consumer. So you want to know as much as possible to deliver the right products. So every other app today, mobile app, is doing that kind of, let's say, algorithm to detect, okay, what is this kind of persona looking for, and then delivers the right product. But the other permissions, like we are used, and I always take Waze as an example. If you use Waze on your mobile phone, it asks you like 15 times, are you sure you want to give the permissions in the background, because else you can't use Waze. So it's in a very consentive way where you ask a user multiple times and you explain, if you don't give us this permission, this will not work. But on Temu, it was they grabbed everything from the beginning, and people didn't understand, why would you need audio recording, microphone access. And with ads, I also learned over the course, over the last year, that China is a total different culture, where people are more used to ordering stuff with voice or using their camera to search for products. but we are not used to that in a European context. And if you hide it then and you don't ask for it, then it seems a little bit strange. That was a little bit the problem.
Yeah, but of course, and indeed, authorities or any other people that regulate the market, of course, they may think, or simply the consumer itself may think, hey, indeed, they're spying on me. But actually, it's not the purpose. Huh?
The biggest question, I think you mentioned it in the beginning. Normally there is a rule, like if it's free, you're the product. How can a company make money that is so cheap? And that was the idea. Okay, are they going to sell our data or not? Probably they don't have any bad intentions. I'm sure of that. I'm sure that they're just willing to scale as large as possible and grow as fast as possible. The only thing is, we in Belgium, we have a disconnect, and I think in the whole of Europe, what you're seeing right now, a disconnect with our government. We are trusting a tech company more than we trust our own government. But then it's quite hard for a European to trust a foreign government, and especially then in a mindset if it's like a Chinese, which is a total different culture and system of ruling.
Okay. So, but indeed, then after this report was issued, and indeed a lot of concern in the media, I think Temu has done efforts to improve it. Is that correct? Or I don't know. Did you? I think you have been checking it.
Yeah, of course. I think one of the main things where I think they could improve is that directly they try to go in defense and say, no, we're not doing this, and look what we're doing good, and this is how much money we spent on security certification and stuff like that. But it was mainly they put a lot of effort to encrypt everything, to make sure that no external hackers can access your personal data. But that's not the problem. The problem was like, okay, why do you need this kind of data from me? And please be more transparent. So it was more in the trust building. And you're seeing that in the last versions, they're not asking those permissions anymore. So they're already skipping a lot of permission. I think now they added a European party who's responsible for your products, or a European company who tested or validate. So they learned over time, but I think the main thing what I would advise them is to like try to be more trustworthy and try to be more honest. And they reached out to me, and very, very open, very cool. They were not threatening at all. They were just asking, what do we need to do to get the trust of the European people? What do we need to improve? Because honestly, we don't have bad intentions. And you can say that, and it's not, it's open, it needs to be proven at the end. But I really believe that they have good intentions, but that it's just, they launched too quickly.
Yeah, and if I may add something to that, because that's a very important point. Because it's basically the speed which they use to market things, and in the people that are Chinese or are doing business with China, they might be familiar with the term chabudo. So it doesn't miss much. So it's not completely finished, but it's good enough to launch.
Off and on.
So what I think they did is, because they set up Temu in the time space of 9 months, they probably took the Chinese app and sort of rebuild that to a European version, launch that, and then later they found out, oh, this is full of things that are actually not allowed. Somebody at TikTok once said, and TikTok, for instance, is under a magnifying glass because a lot of people distrust TikTok and they might be banned in the United States. So they try to do everything perfect from a compliance point of view. And somebody at TikTok says what Temu does is the opposite. They basically launch and they will fix the problems later. And that TikTok person described it as getting on the bus and buying the ticket later. So that refers both to the security and privacy issues, but also to other legislation and things like sending products that are dangerous or don't have the right quality. They first want to launch, grab that market share, and then they will solve the problems. That's basically the strategy that they use. And we in Europe are not used to that, because we think that everybody will play by the rules when they start a business. So from that perspective, we maybe have to be faster in the speed in which we tell these companies, look, you can go into our market, but you have to play by our rules if you want to.
Yes.
And if I can
Sure.
add one more thing to that one, a good example is they're sending, and that is still today, they're sending some, let's say, device log information. Like, okay, which phone is it? It's obvious because an iPhone user is a different type of user than an Android user. But also which apps are installed on your phone, which is genius from a marketing point of view because then you can know your competitors. But it's not right in a European mindset if you buy a Samsung television that Samsung will say, okay, what other electronic devices you have in your home, or you buy clothing from Hugo Boss and Hugo Boss will say, okay, but which other brands you have? If you ask it, maybe we are more than happy to share it, but it's quite strange that it happens under the hood. It's just not what we're used to.
Yeah, no. No, it's a very uh, recognizable indeed. Of course, I have a lot of European or Belgian companies that want to go to China, and indeed, they're always uh, making plans and re-evaluating and evaluating it once more. But indeed, in the meantime, maybe 1 year has passed, and basically the market is gone. And that's indeed the Chinese way of approaching a new market is in a very aggressive way, indeed buying market share basically, and then cleaning up the waste while doing it.
Where we could learn from each other, where we could learn
Mhm.
to have that same pace and speed, and where they could learn from us because to not make the same mistakes, because we spend a lot of time in GDPR and making our rules a little bit more sustainable. And like Facebook is not the Facebook of 10 years ago. It's a different type of company now. So I think we should all evolve.
But of course, there's this big issue that there's a lot of complaints in terms of quality and compliance issue. Even today, I saw in the Belgian newspaper there was, I think, the Comeos, which is, let's say, a association of consumers, complaining about the lack of compliance and also lack of control of all these packs coming from China. So indeed, talking about quality, I think there is really a problem. That's
Yeah. So if you look at the complaints that different consumer organizations have been having, they basically focus on two areas. One area is that these packages are imported by consumers without having to pay import tax. Um, that is not a level playing field of course, for other retailers. But at the same time, it is following our legislation because we in Europe implemented the threshold of 150 euros. And if a package has a lower value, then you don't have to pay import taxes. I assume this was done to sort of not give the customer officers so much work for all of these small packages. And it's also something that has been present for a long time. So any other thing that you would buy from outside of the EU, but also drop shipping companies were applying the same thing. But with Shein and Temu now having these enormous volumes, now it's becoming a problem, of course, and now it's also starting to hurt other retailers. So that's one thing, and it's also a good example of how we are very slow with legislation because now in Europe they are discussing abolishing that 150 euro threshold. So basically, anything that would enter the European Union from China, they and other places, they would have to pay import taxes. But they're planning to implement that in 2028, and Temu is already taking measures that they won't be hurt when this legislation is implemented. So they're much faster and much more agile. The other thing is indeed the quality problem. And that is definitely a point of attention because if you would import as a wholesaler or a retailer goods into the European Union, they have to comply with certain legislations and certain quality standards. That often does not happen with packages that come from Temu. It's not that Temu has made bad products because they're basically a sort of a hybrid platform where these, most of the time, manufacturers in China sell their goods. But one thing that they have done by using that bidding system that I talked about before, if you pressure these manufacturers too hard to constantly lower their price, something has to give in. And they still want to have some kind of margin. So what happens if you do that is that they will use lower quality raw materials. Now, the example I always give is assume that there's a manufacturer that makes winter coats, but Temu pressures them so much to lower their prices that they start using less filling in the coats. and actually it becomes like an autumn coat, and you will be very cold if you wear that in the winter. So that's the kind of thing that tends to happen if you pressure these manufacturers too much. Now, what they did is to try to solve this problem is they implemented a penalty system. If a manufacturer would get, if there would be a quality complaint from a consumer about a product, then the manufacturer would pay up to 5 times the manufacturer's selling price. Now, assuming that they get something like a 10% margin, they might have to pay for 20, 30, 40 new items to be sold to compensate for that one fine. Now, this also led to a lot of disagreements with merchants that were saying, well, Temu is squeezing us, but they are trying to, on the one hand, use that bidding system, and on the other hand, use that penalty system to find the right balance. Something that they found in, say, the last 1.5 years is that they've been pushing too much on low prices, resulting in low quality. What they are doing now, what they've been starting in, I think, the second quarter this year, is they are giving more support to high quality manufacturers, and they're trying to get rid of the low quality merchants on the platform. But this will take time for this to balance out. So again, here it's a question of getting on the bus and buying the ticket later, or the chabudo, as they call it in China, first launch and then solve the problems later. But the thing that they are facing now is they are having a relatively bad reputation for quality now. So they are trying to fix that at the moment as well.
Yeah, but I have a small comment on that as well. You're not seeing that only at Chinese type of industries. We have the same kind of principle at bol.com or at Amazon, and you're putting the problem at the merchant or at the wholesaler. So that's really an issue that a web shop is punishing the manufacturer. Like in Belgium, you see a lot if there is like football season, everyone orders a lot of beamers or giant LCD screens, and next day they need to be returned, and all the sellers on the platform need to take them back anyhow. So they're really putting too much pressure on those kind of smaller shop owners who try to sell.
Correct. Yeah, and if you do that too much, if you pressure them too much, something will have to give in. So that's normally the quality. Yeah.
Yeah, but I saw some of your recent posts or presentations, and there you showed, for example, a certain product which was sold on both Temu as well as Amazon, but then a completely different price. So basically, I think quite often, I'm not sure, but I think a quite decent percentage of products which are sold on Temu are also for sale on Amazon,
Right,
but
yeah.
for a different price, huh?
Yeah. So a lot of the time, it's the same factories that simply sell on different channels. So one factory might sell on Amazon, on Shein, on Temu, and inside China on Pinduoduo. Well, the example I normally use is I bought this on Temu. That's like a cable bag. This, you can buy this for $15, €15 on Amazon, on Shein for €8, on Temu for €5.50, and inside China you can buy it for about €1. That's like, and then still the manufacturer makes some money. But take into account that I've told you that Temu is sort of discounting that price without the consumer knowing. So probably the price they would have to charge for this is roughly the price that Shein also uses, like €8. Still a lot cheaper than on Amazon. Having said that, you cannot be 100% sure that two products that look the same on Temu and on Amazon are actually the same product. Think about that winter coat that I told you about. The picture could be the same, but the quality could be very different. And that could also explain the price difference.
And you also have drop shippers who raise the price.
Yeah, correct.
I'm actually talking about drop shipping, although it's not yet Q&A, but somebody asked, could you explain, I guess, the concept of drop shipping briefly, maybe for some of our listeners? Maybe they don't really know what it is.
I want to do it. It's a trend what you're seeing over the last years a lot. Usually in the beginning, it was also good intention. So instead of you needing to buy stock and you want to resell a product, normally you buy a product from a manufacturer or from a wholesaler, you take it into inventory and you put it on your web shop. But right now, a lot of people don't want inventory because it's that money. Nobody wants inventory. So they want to ship directly from the manufacturer or from the wholesaler. So there are plugins which you can add to any web shop you have currently. You just directly import the products, and you can do it from Alibaba or from AliExpress, but also I think from Shein. I think you can do that, and then you can just add your own price, and they ship directly, so directly from manufacturer or wholesaler to your end customer, and your end customer doesn't know that it's coming from there. They're thinking that it's coming from your web shop. The problem is a lot of Dutch web shops and Belgian web shops, they try to offer it as a Belgium or a European product, and then you need to wait for 2 weeks, and then at the end, after the shipping, or you receive the shipping details, you notice it's coming from a web shop, and you know you're being scammed because the price is mostly ×3 or ×4. Is that a good explanation, Ed? Or do you want to?
Yeah. Just one thing that I need to add is that we need to stress that Temu, Shein, TikTok Shop, AliExpress are not drop shipping platforms. A good example of a drop shipping platform is Wish.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why Wish basically went downhill is that because they drop ship, nobody actually touched the product. It didn't go through a Wish warehouse, whereas all of the shipments that go from China, from Temu, they do go through a Temu warehouse. And then Temu has some form of quality control, and they also have control over the logistical process and thereby the delivery time. Whereas if a dropshipper would do that on Wish, then it would go from a factory and nobody would know what time it would arrive, on what day it would arrive, and what the quality would be, because they would never touch the product. So that's one additional thing to mention, that Temu is not dropshipping.
Okay. Okay, so we talked about how can they sell at such cheap prices. We talked about indeed the quality issues and compliance. So, of course, there's also these huge concerns about. I mean, I even remember when I talked about Temu for the first time, my daughter said, "Ah, yeah, that's the platform where they sell products that are made by child labor." That was the first comment she made. And indeed, we talked about data security as well. So that if you buy on Temu, the Chinese Communist Party will steal your data and will spy on it. So can we agree that all of these very, very strong claims are completely out of control and not true? Or do you think, I mean, maybe to Vincent, if I install Temu on my phone, is there any risk for me as a consumer?
To be honest, not directly. But in security, there is a rule. If it's possible, who says it doesn't happen? So if you have permissions to do something, you could, but they would have no added value to listen to your phone. On the other end, and then I'm just thinking, like if you're talking about governments, and I talked about the trust bit for a foreign government, it is the case, and they can say it's not, but that it's still a Chinese company within the Chinese government under Chinese law, that the companies are required to provide the data to a government authority upon request. And you can say it's no, but it's the truth. And if I refer a few years back to Apple, remember that there was they forced Apple to give up the encryption keys for iMessage, and they just said, sorry for my language, fuck off to government. I can never imagine that will happen in China. And I think we saw it many years ago with Hikvision, with very security cameras, with networking equipment like switching and routers. It's all very sensitive. And especially if you're then like in a government official, let's say, job, I don't think you should install any private application which isn't vetted by national security. So I think it's a stupid discussion. From a consumer point of view, I don't think there is any issue as long as you're aware that you're giving away some permissions and you're getting cheap products in return. And if that's okay for you, then that's okay. I don't think there is any risk of putting in your credit card information. It's safe. They pay back the data. You can send back the product. It's fast. It's cheap. So why not? But from a, let's say, official point of view, I would never install any third-party app on if I'm a minister or or when I can access to, let's say, country trade secrets
or sensitive.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can add a couple of things to that. So I completely agree with Vincent, but Vincent, you also mentioned the national security law, and that is very often is used as a reason for say, look, your data is going to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, the thing is that national security law indeed um, says that companies need to share their data with the government if the government asks them to for national security reasons. So basically, every country has such laws. We also have such laws. So how would something for national security be related to somebody that purchases like cups and sauces on Temu? It's not so much of a relationship. The Having said that, it doesn't really matter. Jeremy Down of China Law Translate wrote an article discussing this law, and he basically said it's not what the law is for, but it doesn't matter because if the Chinese Communist Party would want to have your data, they have many different ways to have them give you their data. So that law is really irrelevant. It can happen, and then the question is, what is the risk of this happening? How realistic or how likely is it that the Chinese government would want to have your data from Temu? So in that case, I think we should apply Occam's razor or Hitchens' razor and say, well, it's maybe not very likely, and maybe there's a lot of people that claim that this is happening without having any sort of evidence. And Hitchens' razor says, if you don't have any evidence, I can also just dismiss your claim. I cannot prove it, but you cannot prove it. It's not happening. So I think that we basically need to, in these cases, think about how likely is it, and what would the Chinese government want to
Correct.
do with that kind of data.
Correct. And I can answer on that as well. I think it's more common that Mossad will view any of your data than it will be China. But still, it's just a discussion where we are not used to, and that just to go back, we fought very hard to get like a European GDPR law, where we have the right to know what they collect about us, the right to be forgotten, that they can remove the data, and it's just more trustworthy from a European company. And I think in some level, in the near future, China will become that company or that country where we can also have that trust that if we say, please remove my data, and they will say, yes, we remove your data, that it will be removed. And maybe to jump already one topic, but I remember that there was a time for TikTok where they claimed, and that is the problem with their trustworthiness sometimes, is they claimed, no, we can't access your data. And the two internal staff members of TikTok access journalist data from the TikTok platform. So you see, so there is already in the past, there were a lot of lies being told by different people, by different companies. So it's a little bit bad publicity they already had from the past. So I think it will take a time to get over that and then to establish new trust.
Losing trust is easy, but building the trust again is very difficult. That takes time.
One thing that I need to add to that specific case is what TikTok did is they accessed the location data of two journalists, not because they were so interested in these two journalists, but because two staff members had leaked information to these journalists, and they wanted to find out who of our staff members was at the same location as this journalist. So they tried to find the internal leaks. But by doing so, they accessed private information which they should not have. So I think there's also that side of the story.
They claimed they were not capable of.
Correct.
So that is a little bit the problem with especially the trust.
Another thing about which you mentioned is the discussion about labor conditions. So I see a lot of people saying, or for instance, on LinkedIn and other social media, it's all been made by child labor. But anybody that works with Chinese companies and Chinese manufacturers, like you also do, I think will know that this is not really something that happens in Chinese factories, child labor. That doesn't mean that there might not be some teenager working illegally in a factory somewhere, but it's not a common thing. And actually, Shein admitted or reported even that they found two of these cases and they punished the concerned manufacturer. So,
if I can recall it was last year. It was PostNL in the Netherlands who had the same issue.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it happens everywhere, but it's not something that you don't have like a regular children making products in factories in China. I don't know about other countries, but it's not a thing that happens in China.
No.
Then the other thing is that you will hear people, well, they have to work such long hours, and then they send somebody from Channel 4 in the UK into a factory to do some undercover research in a factory that supplies Shein. And then they go to these laborers and they ask, so how many hours do you work per day? 12 hours per day. Do you like your work? No, I hate it. And then the interview stops. But they never ask, would you like to work less hours per day? Because this completely ignores the Chinese context where most of the people that work in these factories come from the countryside. They work in these factories. They want to make as many hours as possible per day because they want to earn more money so they can go back home, or they need to fund the education of their kids, or even buy a house for their son, because otherwise their son would not find a wife in the countryside. So they want to work as many hours as possible. They normally sleep in a dormitory. So would you prefer to spend every night in a dormitory or make some extra money? And if you would tell these people, okay, from now on, you cannot work 12 hours anymore, you have to work 8 hours, they won't turn up the next day because they will move over to the factory on the other side of the road where they can work 12 hours. So it's the thing is that we are looking at these kinds of situations through rose-colored glasses of Western European work-life balance and not having enough knowledge about how things work in China. The other thing that I want to mention is Shein and Temu didn't create these factories. These are the factories that have been making our products for
We have already been
decennia.
buying them
Yeah.
a long
Yeah.
time before, but not
So-
through Temu, but probably then through other platforms.
Yeah.
And if I can add to that, and it's 100% correct. At like Huawei was one of my main customers 5-6 years ago, and I spent there a week in Shenzhen working together with them. And it was an office job, but super nice office, 11 hours straight, almost no break. But the people liked it so much, and they had such a work ethic, and they were proud to work for Huawei. And if I compare it to my team, they're also proud for working for me. But still, if it's like 5:05, they're already looking to their watch. And it's like, it's just a different culture. It's a culture thing. We are not proud anymore. They want to work as many hours. I'm not saying that this is the common ground, but I saw it with my own eyes that it's not, that it was a wrong perception that we have to start with from China.
Yeah. And of course, all these shortcomings indeed are then often put out of context, but then they reach the headlines of most newspapers, and then indeed other newspapers will use the same source, and then indeed this creates a whole story, which is then indeed partly true, but out of context. This is, I think, this is basically indeed all these misconceptions, which I also have to face many times. But let's go back to Temu, because we talked about the discounted prices, but I think there's also something we can say about the way they do marketing. I think also there they got into trouble with the European regulations, and the gamification and the almost like an addictive way of doing marketing.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, so there's what they call dark patterns and dark marketing techniques inside the app. And if you're very sensitive to these kinds of gamifications, it can be very addictive. And what some of these games do, they actually make you scroll through lots of products, hoping that you will buy some of these products. For instance, to feed fish, you will have to scroll through product for 30 seconds because you need fish food. And if you feed all of the fish, then after a while you get a free product. So those are things that are happening inside the app. In some cases, these things are not allowed. Also, like clocks that are ticking away and giving you that feeling of FOMO, fear of missing out. So you think this product is not available tomorrow anymore. Well, I can tell you it will be, but you think it's not available anymore, and that's why you buy it. So these are things that are not allowed, but it's not something that we haven't seen in Europe and in the West before, because Booking.com, for instance, has been punished for the same kind of behavior. So that doesn't mean that Temu should be allowed to do it, but it's not something that they made up. Another example that I often give is I talked about how Temu behind the scenes is subsidizing these prices, and the consumer actually get a discount without knowing it. So they think this is this €5.5 for this product. That's the normal price. Whereas after a while it will go up to €8. So I gave a lecture recently for a room full of e-commerce professionals, and I said, "Who thinks that this is unethical to cheat the consumer in thinking that this is the right price, but you're actually giving him a discount without him knowing?" And in the whole room, there was one person that raised his hand and said, "No, I think it's unethical." And there were 300 people in the room. Then I told them the story that I used to work for an American office supply company, and they were working at that time still with printed catalogs. And they would send their prospects a catalog that had prices that were 20 to 30% lower. Then people thought, oh, this is really cheap stuff. Then they would order from that catalog. Then they would get the regular catalog the next time with the normal prices. So all of these things are unethical and are dirty marketing tricks, but it's not something that the Chinese have made up themselves. I think in many cases they've learned these tricks from us.
And strictly speaking, it's not illegal, right? Or is it?
I'm not sure if it is illegal or not. I think that, for instance, in Belgium, you're not allowed to sell under cost price. Then the question is, what is the definition of the cost price?
Right.
Is that the manufacturing cost price or the cost price that you are still able to sell it for with a profit? But also supermarkets also use what they call loss leaders, where they have certain products that they don't make a profit on or even make a loss on, but they pull people into the supermarkets.
Yeah, but we have some strong regulations. We have only like a period. It's called sperperiode. It's like a very short period where they can lower their prices, and indeed you can't sell with loss on your purchase price. But we discussed this. If you change or move your costs into a different P&L where you have it like in shipping costs or in other operational expenses, you can mask that. I think a little bit here let's say the dirty thing is that it's all combined. We are used in, I did a lot of e-commerce over a lot of years. And like you have those techniques like abandon basket, send the customer an email like, hey, there is some stuff in your basket. Click here now. You still have a discount, a timer that goes off. So we all saw them like advertising a higher price. If there is like a discount, advertising a higher price, that the net price will still be higher, but you think you're making a great deal. I think those techniques are there for many, many years, but I think Temu just combined everything. And now it looks like, oh, and the ad gamification and a wheel and a timer. And that is what it makes so obvious.
Yeah. Now, I think I read in one of the articles you wrote for TechBuzz China that what is now very interesting, if you look at the evolution now, it seems like Temu, indeed, because of regulation or regulatory compliance, they need to adapt. Then, also, of course, also in terms of quality, you talked about prices going up after some time. And we also, from the other side, we see Amazon moving a little bit more towards the way Temu's business model is going. So it looks like maybe in 1 year from now, we will have an Amazon and a Temu and maybe other players basically copying each other's business models. And so in the end, it's all basically the level playing field again. Is that correct? Or?
Yeah, that's correct. So what I told you is Temu had that fully managed model, which they started with when they sent packages from China. They added in March this year the semi-managed model, where they basically let the merchant put the materials into a country of destination and ship from there. That's very close to fulfillment by Amazon already. And now they are adding very soon also a third-party platform where basically it's an open marketplace, just like a lot of Amazon, and anybody can sell and they can determine the price themselves. Now, these three models are also being used by AliExpress, by Shein, and by TikTok. So these Chinese players are all using versions of the fully managed and the semi-managed model and an open platform. And in the case of Shein, their own self-produced goods. So what we see happening at the same time is that under the pressure of Temu, Amazon has now started Amazon Whole. That's basically like a Temu-like shop inside Amazon, separated from their normal shop, where products, I think that they are not allowed to have products above $20. And they use the same model as Temu does. So it ships directly as a separate package from China to the Western consumer. So they have copied the fully managed model. So all of these different e-commerce companies are becoming more and more the same. The only big difference is that there will probably be no other company that has such a strong integration into the supply chain and into the Chinese industrial belts as Pinduoduo. So I think that at the end of the day, Temu might still be the most successful in this business model.
And it's also about like sharing the business ideas, because like for example, the Alibaba cloud platform, many of those I had a talk earlier today about those cheap IP cameras. They're all leveraging on the same platform, the same shared IoT platform. So you're seeing that they're doing it way smarter than us. Instead of all developing our own technology, they're using shared technology where you can create or build cheaper products based on the same kind of firmware or SDK.
Yeah. And another thing that is happening is a merchant might be selling certain products on Amazon because he can get because of that higher price, he can get a better margin on Amazon. But if there's certain products in his assortment that he cannot sell well on Amazon, he might offload them to Temu and sell them for a lower price there just to get rid of that surplus stock. And thereby he's willing to take a lower price or maybe even make a small loss because he doesn't want the inventory costs anymore. So these merchants are using these different types of platforms for different strategies at the same time.
So there's room for all of them to play, but then, of course, from say a Belgian or European perspective, suppose I'm a small Belgian retailer, or I have my own web shop, or or I just have my physical store here in a small town in Belgium, or I'm a Belgian brand and I want to sell my products. What should I do? I think it's really difficult for those kind of players to respond to them.
Maybe that's the part about a little bit fair competition, where I think a lot of people are maybe not super happy about because they're losing business. But I also discussed it with Ed last time. I think industries need those kind of innovative concepts to challenge us every time. So it can be good and it can be bad, but at some point we need some challenging revolution. If you see to Uber or Netflix or those kind of disruptive technologies, they disrupted an industry. And now in Belgium, I don't know how it is in the Netherlands, but taxi fees are lower due to Uber to compensate it a little bit. So I think those kind of new disruptive business models can also help our traditional economy.
Correct. And it's actually, I mean, the thing that you said, Bart, that it is pressuring retailers in Europe. And we've discussed that there is no level playing field now because Temu can send stuff into the European Union without having the import taxes, not having the same quality. So these are definitely issues that we need to solve somehow as Europe. At the same time, we also completely underestimate what this company is capable of. Pinduoduo, the company behind Temu, has taken 20% market share from Alibaba in a few years' time. The same thing could happen here. Now, with the semi-managed model, there's also something else that's happening. When they put goods, when a merchant or a manufacturer puts goods in a warehouse in Europe, for instance, it doesn't have to go into a small package in an airplane anymore. That means that they can sell all kinds of big, bulky goods like furniture, like fat bikes, like gardening tools, all of these things they can now sell. So that means that for retailers in Europe, they need to realize that no product category is safe from Temu. Basically, they can sell anything. At the same time, what also happens is that it's most of the time it's like unbranded or unknown brands. So brands, of course, still have a value to create trust with consumers. So if you are a retailer that sells trustworthy brands, that sells unique products, that has a very good service, after sales service, gives very good advice, then there's still a market for you. But if you're a retailer that tries to compete on price, you will not win from these Chinese players.
Well, I think there's even now third model, which is now, I think, about to be launched by Temu, which is indeed as a platform model. Or anyway, if I understand it well, it would basically mean that we as European merchants or European brands can also sell our products on Temu in the future. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, that's the third-party platform. So anybody can sell on Temu. They will start, of course, with some interesting brands. You can sell on Temu. You will determine your own price, but Temu still has their hands on the controls of how much traffic your shop will get. So if you sell for a price that's the same as elsewhere on the internet, they have the possibility to just not give you any traffic. So they might also go into a model where you have to buy that traffic, for instance, by search engine marketing, or if you lower your price, they will give you that traffic, but then you will have to have a lower price than elsewhere on the internet. So that's the game they will continue to play.
And I remember a few years ago, when Coolblue launched in Belgium from the Netherlands, there was like the average price of a washing machine was like 500 euros. Now you can have a washing machine for 300 euros. So they forced the manufacturers to make a washing machine because their model was so good to predict how many machines that they were able to sell if it reached a certain price. So they looked back to the manufacturers and said, I want a washing machine only for our platform. It's almost the same as what you can find in other shops, but it's like very small differences in the model, and it's only for that specific brand. And that is now also what you're going to see, that web shops are going to thrive, and especially like industries, they're going to change an industry by forcing a manufacturer to lower the price because they can make assumptions which are quite good because of their smart AI model.
Correct. Very good point. And as a matter of fact, Temu is already also doing this. Pinduoduo is doing this in China. They call this C2M, consumer to manufacturer, where Temu has so much big data that they can actually tell a manufacturer for certain products, this is what the consumers really want, what they are looking for. A very simple example, if a manufacturer makes blue dresses, but Temu sees that the consumer likes red, they can tell the manufacturer, you need to make red dresses instead of blue ones. And this is something that they will also, this kind of big data and AI predictions, they will specifically offer to high quality manufacturers. And thereby they are trying to upgrade the quality on their platform as well.
Yes.
Wow. So I think indeed the main message is for our listeners and everybody on this side of the world, just follow up what's going on in China, because indeed, I think you also witness yourself at many times that people are not interested in Temu. Suddenly, they are disrupting our retail markets, and then now everybody is interested in the topic. I think indeed it's a good lesson for everybody to keep track of what's happening in China, because there's a lot of things we can learn from them. Of course, despite all the shortcomings and challenges, this also has to offer.
Correct. Because I have been studying Pinduoduo since they launched in 2016. When I heard that Temu was coming to America, I thought this could be a real threat. This could be a real problem, because look at what they've done to Alibaba inside China. Take away that 20% market share. But the thing is that there's not enough attention to what's going on in China. And that's why we didn't see TikTok coming. And Facebook does not like TikTok. Facebook does like Temu because Temu spends a lot of marketing dollars on the Facebook platform. But TikTok is and Temu and Shein will not be the last ones. I can already give you some names of Chinese companies that are coming our way, and nobody knows them here because we're not paying attention to what's going on there, and thereby we put ourselves into a situation that's a real danger. And then if a company like Temu launches in our market, and yes, they are not always playing by the rules, but we're caught by surprise. And we think that just regulating things will make them go away, but they are so agile. And one thing that I also point out, a company, an e-commerce company in China has to work under extreme competition with other e-commerce companies. So they need to be much more agile, but they also work under a government that can implement new laws very quickly and sometimes arbitrary. So they are used to be much more agile, and then it takes us 4 years to change the import tax legislation. Like I said, by that time they've already solved the problem for themselves. So we need to look more at what's happening in the digital space in China. well, read some articles on TechBoss China, go with us on a study tour. I find it extremely hard to convince retailers to go to China on a study tour because there's some kind of complacency or arrogance. They all think it's not necessary. And that's why we get surprised by these types of platforms that launch. And like I said, they won't be the last ones.
And if I can contribute to that as well, like I've been in IT for many years, and like a traditional IT decision process was, and I'm talking about 2-3 years ago, was thinking for 6 months, implementing a new solution for a year, and then testing it, and then so you had like a total lead time of a year and a half. Right now in AI, if you do something and you can't prove it in 2 weeks and you can't implement it in a month, you're already too late because new models are coming out every time. So you need that kind of agility and a kind of speed of a startup, but in an enterprise scale. And that is what China is doing very awesomely. And I think we can learn from that as well.
Wow. All very interesting. Thank you very much. So I invite all of the listeners, if you have any specific questions, we really need to go to the Q&A. Before we do so, indeed, as already mentioned by Ed, I invite all of you to follow Ed's blogs and articles on different platforms. Also go on YouTube because there's also a very interesting YouTube conversation between Vincent and Ed, where they dig in this technical features even more. And of course, please also follow us on BCECC because we also have a lot of interesting topics on different platforms. So, but let's go to the Q&A. I have here another Vincent who is asking, well, I was a little bit confused because there was indeed an article on the VRT website, the Belgian television station, but it says there that the item about this big issue was in March 2024 and not in March 2023. But so he's confused, but I'm not sure whether it's a mistake or.
I think the TV article, the TV show was in March last year.
2023.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We talked about another question. We talked about quality and compliance. We did not really talk about the issue of IP, so intellectual property or counterfeit products. Is this still a big topic, Ed? I mean, if we talk about products from China?
Yeah, it is. It's basically the same problem as with the quality, that Temu is selling products from manufacturers. And sometimes these manufacturers make copied products and they infringe on other people's IP. I know that Temu has very big penalties on that. And if manufacturers are found to do that, they get those fines that I mentioned or even get kicked off the platform. But it's quite obvious that they haven't completely solved the problem because you do hear a lot of complaints from people in the market that there is still a lot of counterfeit and IP infringement in products that you can buy on Temu.
And that is something like, I think the most obvious example is like an Eames chair, like the iconic Eames chair. I think there are over 50 manufacturers selling them at different prices, and they're just missing or they're just changing some minor details. So it comes back to the question, and where is the IP? And I think indeed for small companies who created a unique product, and now like the same company who's doing the molds in China now resells it to another company, that is it's an issue.
Well, we talked about another question. We talked about Temu. We also briefly touched upon Shein. We didn't talk about AliExpress. I mean, of course, they were first. Are they completely gone now, or do we still need to take them into account, or are they also changing their business model?
So AliExpress actually launched around 2010, 2011. But the problem with AliExpress is that it never got the attention it really needed because it's just part of such a big company, Alibaba Group, and Alibaba Group was mostly focusing on the domestic market inside China because of the tough competition there with all kinds of different platforms like Pinduoduo, JD, etc., etc. So I think that Alibaba, seeing the success of Shein and Temu, they realized that they dropped the ball. And since 1 or 2 years, they've been investing more and more again in their cross-border platforms, not only AliExpress, but also, for instance, Lazada in Southeast Asia. But they're not very they're not very profitable. So they are investing, but they cannot keep up with the other platforms as far as I can see from the data. Having said that, in some markets they are very popular, but overall globally they're not on the same scale as a Temu or a Shein. But they are considered to be, as they call in China, one of the four little dragons that go overseas, and those are Shein, AliExpress, Temu, and TikTok Shop.
Okay. So in the very beginning, we talked about the difference between the fully managed and the semi-managed model. I think there's a question, Medit, how exactly do they operate? Could you, maybe you went a little bit too fast, or could you explain a little bit more in detail? Okay, the operational side, how does it actually work? How do they do this shipping of the goods to Europe?
Okay, so a fully managed model, a manufacturer puts his goods in a warehouse of Temu in the south of China, in Guangdong province. Then if a consumer orders, it goes into a package. Then these packages, multiple packages go in a brick brown box. These boxes go into an airplane. Then the boxes go to a local courier, like for instance DHL. At DHL, they rip open the boxes, and there they become individual packages again in a sorting center, and then they go to the consumer. So this whole process, Temu pays for this process, and that's why the manufacturer will have a lower margin on products that are sold through the fully managed model. The semi-managed model, basically what Temu says to a manufacturer is, instead of sending it to our warehouse in China, you send it to a warehouse overseas. And that could be your own warehouse, it could be a rented warehouse, it could even be fulfillment by Amazon, because Amazon also operates for other platforms from their warehouses. And then when it is sold by Temu, Temu is still the party that determines the end price and sells the goods. And then when it is sold, then also the manufacturer or the merchant is responsible for having a local courier send it to the consumer. Now, the only thing, the interesting thing is that Temu normally, because of the volume they do, negotiates with warehouses and local couriers to get a very low price that the merchant can then use. So that's basically the big logistical difference between these two models.
And that explains indeed why on one side they can do it so cheap, but on the other side, indeed, if you place an order with Temu, it could take maybe 10 days or so, or 1 week or 10 days to get the products, and not the next day.
Correct. And if you buy through the semi-managed model, then you can get it normally like in 1 or 2 days. But then the price will normally be a bit higher. It will be closer to the Amazon price, about 85% of the Amazon price on average.
Another interesting question, I think, indeed, maybe we didn't explain in detail. So, of course, Temu is part of PDD Holdings, which is, of course, in China known as Pinduoduo. The question coming in is, how does this work? And I mean, how can Pinduoduo get such an amount of money to do this kind of marketing and subsidize Temu for their marketing approach in Europe?
So Pinduoduo is doing extremely well in their home market, especially under the current economic conditions where consumers are much more reluctant in spending a lot of money. So they went from maybe 5 years ago, in China, we were talking about a consumer upgrade. People were going for the more expensive brands. But nowadays, they also realize, okay, I want to spend less money. So there's also very good non-branded products that are just as good. So there's a consumption downgrade taking place. And because most of these unbranded products are made by the manufacturers that Pinduoduo works with, they have a very good integration into the supply chain for these products, and they can offer them on their platform, Pinduoduo. They've been doing so well that they've created enormous marketing reserves in the last 3 or 4 years. And they are using this money basically to invest in Temu and to buy market share abroad. Now, I just today on Twitter, I shared the latest financial results of Pinduoduo. And despite having launched Pinduoduo and spending, for instance, on advertising money alone, about 3 to 4 billion US dollars per year, their cash reserves are still growing. So they can keep up this game for a very, very long time. And that's also one of the reasons why I think that the ambition that Temu has, and their ambition is to be number 2 in America behind Amazon, and their ambition is to be number 1 in Europe, where e-commerce is much more fragmented in local parties like Bol and Coolblue and Kaufland, etc., etc. I think that they have a very good chance in succeeding in that ambition.
Okay, one more question. I think probably the last one for today. Do you think that Temu could start its own international logistics in the future? I don't know if you could answer that, Ed.
They could, but they won't. If you look at Pinduoduo is an organization that is very lean and mean. They only have about 17,000 people, and the organization is run like a military operation. And anything that is not their core business, they outsource. They also do that in China. They don't have their own logistics, but what they do is they work with certain logistical parties. For instance, they've worked with JT Express, which was a startup from, I think it was Singapore or some country in Southeast Asia that was run by Chinese people. And because this company wanted to gain market share, they could offer a very low price to Temu. So that's also one of the ways they kept their logistics down. But they won't. It's very unlikely that they will set up their own logistical service. What they might do, and what I know what they are doing, is they are setting up some warehouses, for instance, in the United States, either their own warehouses or like rented warehouses, if they want to have more control, but they will never do the full logistical process.
Okay, maybe one final question to each of you, or well, you can decide for yourself, but please be short. Should we be happy with Temu, or is it something we should hope it will disappear one day?
I don't think it will disappear one day. And should we be happy with Temu? That depends on who you are. I think as a retailer, you should not be happy with Temu. As a consumer, if Temu gets their quality improved, then you have a very good alternative. As Europe as a whole, I think we should be faster to make Temu play by the rules and create that level playing field again.
Vincent, final word?
Same opinion. I think as an end consumer, if they can make up their promise and they can deliver in time and you have good products for a decent price, why not? From a retailer point of view. And I think as well from, let's say, an economic point of view, I have always the intention to buy from local stores just to support my local economy. But at the end, as an end consumer, I think you shouldn't care. Cheap products for good value, why not?
Okay. So thank you very much, Ed and Vincent. This is really, really very interesting and very eye-opening, I think. So I would like to thank you on behalf of Belgian-Chinese Chamber and invite also all the participants in the future to take part in any of our activities. So please go to our website, bcecc.be. You can also follow our WeChat account. If all goes well, you'll see there in front of you the correct links and the QR code. Please subscribe to our newsletter. So in this way, you will be kept informed about all our activities in the near future. So thank you again to all the speakers and looking forward to meet all of you again very soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.